All right. Welcome, everybody. So, today I want to talk to you about what I'm calling living epistleship, which the fun about being up front and talking is that I could just say a word like epistleship, and you guys will believe me that it's a real word. And I'm not sure that it is or not. I haven't checked. But it might be. It might be. So, yeah, it's about living epistleship. So, in order to explain, what I'm after tonight, I've just got to explain a little bit about the past few days for me, what's been going on. So, as you could see, Pastor Chris and Marge and some of their kids are not here, and grandkids and all that. They kind of had a last-minute trip come up, and Christy and I were in a position where we were trying to figure out, is it something, she was invited, I was invited too, but my decision was already made for me because I just was off for an extended period for the birth of our baby. So I'm tapped out as far as time off. So I knew I wasn't going, but we were trying to figure out whether Christy was going to go or not. And, the debate was basically, is it going to be too much for her with the two kids without my loving support, or was she going to be able to handle it? And it took until the last minute, but ultimately she made the decision that she did want to go, and she was going to take the kids. And I don't think we came to this conclusion until probably about maybe an hour to 2 hours before they were going to leave for this trip. So all of a sudden, my days just shifted in a dramatic way, in that I was going to be home, left to my own devices for Sunday afternoon to Wednesday. And granted, I'd be at work for some of that time, but there would be a lot of time that was now normally committed to various family responsibilities and obligations that all of a sudden was opened up to make a decision on, how I was going to spend it. And Mark Repecki was actually in a very similar boat. And when Eve had decided to go, and he knew that Christy was not going to go, he was like, so what are you going to do? And I was like, well, I'm not exactly sure yet. I think I have an idea of what I want to do, what I should be doing, but I don't have any definite plans just yet. And he was like, oh, well, I'm going down to watch the football game a little bit later. So he's like, that's definitely an option. You could go to that. I was like, yeah, that's a possibility, but I already was kind of feeling like that God was prompting me to go basically to spend my time a different way. Certainly nothing wrong with going to the football game and fellowshipping and hanging out and all that. That's great. But in this instance, I didn't feel like that's what I was supposed to do. And when I made the decision that I was going to sit in my house alone for the remainder of the day, it quickly turned into essentially that let's not spend the day alone at my house. Let's invite somebody else into the day to participate, and his name is God. And so just with everything that's been going on over the past month, new baby, transition, all that stuff, it's not like I've had no walk with the Lord over this past month, but it's obviously not as predictable as maybe I would have liked it to be. And I felt like God was prompting me to just say, all right, well, don't commit to something that's going to be labor-intensive on your part. He's like, just start by refreshing your mind, by renewing your mind. Just begin there. It doesn't have to be sitting and actively praying, and just listen. Find something to listen to. And I knew that there was a particular minister that had a number of sermons that I was backlogged on. I usually like to listen to them. I hadn't gotten to listen to them for quite a while. And so I decided to start there, and there was probably a couple hours of material, maybe as much as 3 hours of material that was backlogged, that was available, that I hadn't heard, that I had been wanting to listen to anyway. And so I began to listen, and as I began to hear it, and the word began to speak to me and minister to me, it made something come alive, and it began to enlighten my perspective from where I had been, and it was just showing me something new, and I was very engaged, and I knew the more that I was listening, the more excited I was getting, but at the same time, I was not actually with other people. There was no intention to leave the house. But when I had gotten my fill of hearing this ministry and hearing the words spoken, that's when I felt like God said, okay, well, you've gone from listening, your mind is renewed in a way that you're now focused on my purposes. So he's like, now I want you to begin to pray out of what you're hearing. And one of the things that I had been hearing, and it's not that the minister had said this term, because again, I don't know if epistleship is an actual word, but living epistleship was the thing that was kind of on my heart. And so I began to pray and speak about it and meditate on it Sunday night. And I was at a point where I just felt like, wow, there's an enormous amount of potential that is in front of us every single moment of the day. There is so much potential every single day that God wants us to see. And I was thinking about the passage. It's in 2 Kings chapter 6. And I don't have the exact verse up right now. I'm not going to actually go and read it, but essentially you've got Elijah the prophet with his servant, and they see that there's an enormous army that's surrounding their area, their city. And the servant's response is, oh boy, we're in trouble here. Look at this army. And his question was, what are we going to do? Or something to that effect. And Elijah said, or it said that he prayed this prayer. He said, open the eyes of my servant so that he may see. And when he prayed the prayer, then all of a sudden his servant saw another realm entirely, and that other realm was essentially an angel army that was vastly superior to the enemy forces that this guy was seeing in the natural, vastly superior. And that also confirmed to me a concept. I guess it could be somewhere else in the Bible too, but I was like, oh yeah, when we sing about the God of angel armies, that verse is literally about angel armies. Like literally, there's potential for there to be a legion of angels gathered and working and moving. And my point is that this servant, before the prayer was prayed, before his mind was opened up to what was possible, he just saw the trouble. He just saw the enemy forces, not realizing the enormous scope of what was going on behind the scenes. And so I was just on this stuff. I was thinking about this stuff, praying about this stuff, and I'm just realizing that there is so much more going on around us than we realize. I don't know that there's literally an angel army all the time around us, but I do know that there's unseen realities all the time. That I'm sure of. And so with all this in mind, getting ready to go to bed, knowing I'm going to start the next day, go to work, I've got basic the next day. Not really any firm plan in place at that time for what we were doing at basic, but I just felt like I was going to do something that I rarely do as far as work is concerned, and that was get to work at 7 o'clock in the morning so that, and Jeanette can certainly attest to that. The few years we've worked together, that's an unseen reality right there. It's just not something that I typically do, is get there right at 7. But I felt like God was saying, well, this is where you're leaving off Sunday night. If you want to pick it up, if you want to resume it on Monday, just get up, get to work early, get that out of the way. This way you can have a bunch of free time before basic and just dive in again, same way, but not having to gain all the ground again. You're already there, just go for it. So that's what I did. And it was funny because, I felt like he was speaking to say, preserve what you have. Preserve what you were doing on Sunday night. Even though you're at work, preserve it. Don't forget it. Don't let it be bogged down with work or other things. Just keep that thing alive so that you can go from thing to thing to thing, knowing you're walking with unseen realities supporting you. And it's been a funny thing because just that day, I'm just thinking of the order here. That day, I don't want to get too much into the details because I don't want this to be an advertisement, but there's been a certain, we'll call it a business transaction that I've been working on for a couple months, wanting to see happen, waiting for it to happen, hoping that it would happen. And so far there had been virtually no interest or no useful interest in what I had to offer. And it just was annoying, and it was, kind of bothersome because it had been a couple months. And I felt like one of the things that God was speaking was that don't get bogged down in what would otherwise bog you down. So that's probably very different for you than it is for me. But for me, I know some of the things I might get distracted by. For example, I might pull out my phone and maybe I'll bring up Facebook. Or maybe I'll check my checking account balance. Or maybe I'll watch a YouTube video on a guy doing handstands. Or maybe I'll do a handstand. So there's all these things that they might distract me at any given moment. They might divert my attention. And he was very specific that if you want to stay where you are right now, you need to be consciously avoiding what would distract you. So that meant if you got a Facebook notification that came up on your phone, just delete it and don't look, because it's probably not important anyway. It's somebody just wanting to play Candy Crush with you, which I don't play anyway, and stop sending me requests. But so it might be that. I got an amen. Awesome. First amen of the night. But yeah, so anyway, the point is, I had to get out of what would otherwise bog me down, and what I already know will bog me down. And you all have those things. I know that you do. You know the things that distract you. You know the things that you use to waste your time. You know what they are. I can't say what they are for you, but my point is, sometimes you have to make a decision to lay some of that stuff down in order to pursue what's actually greater and pursue that unseen reality that I'm talking about. So anyway, the irony of all that is that's the position I'm in, and yet I ended up getting a phone call that somebody was very interested in potentially completing that business transaction that I had been waiting on. And the irony is that this is something that I was, not necessarily worried about, but there was, I would think about it from time to time. It would bother me from time to time. And once it's all put down, the solution walks its way into your hands. And I just feel like that's indicative of what God is actually looking to do in many, many occasions in our lives, is that he wants you to, Jesus summarized it best in Matthew 6. He said, seek first the kingdom, Seek first the kingdom. If you seek first the kingdom, then the things will come. The things that you need, the things that are weighing on you, solutions will come. But first you seek. And so with that in mind, one of the things that it was somewhat ministered on in some of those sermons I'd been listening to on Sunday, but it was coming to the forefront even more so, is the idea of our priority lists. And a lot of times people will make a list, I should say, especially people who are in church will make some kind of list to this effect. They'll say, well, God's on top, my family's next, so my wife, my kids, my church and or ministry, and then my job, or some kind of order. Generally, people will come up with an order. And I wouldn't say there's anything wrong with having that order per se, but what I feel like I'm becoming alert to is that if you realize the first priority all the time, and you live out of that all the time, yes, there will be times that you have to tend to other things on the list, so to speak, but they'll come much more effectively, much more naturally. Everything about it can be enhanced by always maintaining priority number one. And so what I mean by that, I know I'm saying something and some people are maybe scratching their head of, well, that's the list, Bill. That's what we go by. Don't question the list. And so here's what I'm thinking, and here's what I'm seeing, and we'll read it together. So I guess it's a good time to open the Bible. So, all right, before we read the verse, if we just talk about some of the epistles that Paul wrote. So you've got, for example, Romans or Ephesians or Colossians. I would say, certainly at least in all three of those books, there's a certain pattern that's followed. And the pattern is that the first several chapters, or more than 50%, I would say, are devoted to Paul's awesome revelation about Jesus, or what God has accomplished in the spirit realm, or some legal explanation for why we've been set free. Like if you take Ephesians, for example, he introduces the idea that we have been predestined into something awesome in Christ, and that God made it for us. He made a salvation. He made it by faith, not works. He broke down barriers between people so that Jews and Gentiles could coexist and live together. He said that an awesome mystery has unfolded in Christ Jesus. He's set up all this stuff. He's looking to, what does it say? He's looking to do immeasurably more than all we ask. And he's laying this awesome picture in the first few chapters of Ephesians. But then there's a transition where you start to talk about, well, what comes from that? So I've heard all this awesome stuff, but what is supposed to happen as a result of that? What will life look like as a result of that? And Ephesians chapter 4, verse 1 is the easiest way to illustrate what I'm talking about with this priority list. And it says, Paul says, as a prisoner for the Lord, then, I urge you to live a life worthy of the calling you have received. And that is the key right there, is that we've all received a calling in our life. Christ is a part of all of us, and there is supposed to be a standard associated with that calling that basically you can have received the call of Christ but not necessarily live your life in a worthy way. In other words, there's a standard that he's saying is possible and available, but just because you have the call doesn't mean you'll necessarily live up to it. But he's urging people, he's saying, live a life that's worthy to that calling. And then the following chapters, from that point, he essentially will explain, well, here's what it's going to look like. So I'll give a practical example. So later on in chapter 5, he'll talk about husbands and wives. And he'll say, therefore, husbands, love your wife as Christ loved the church. He laid down his life entirely so that she could be presented blameless, spotless, radiant, all those good things. So in other words, he's saying part of the worthy walk is that you'll love your wife like Christ loved the church. Right. And so what I'm saying, and if it hasn't become clear yet, is that if you keep what God has done as the main thing, if you keep that as the priority, then instead of worrying about shifting down to a different one of saying, all right, I got to take care of my wife. There's something, she needs this, that, or the other thing. I need to help in this way or carry this burden or whatever. So you've already shifted and said, I need to focus on my wife now. But in reality, if you walk out the call of God, you can fulfill what she needs without ever having diverted your attention from the number one priority. And in doing so, you'll actually essentially be in an act of worship to God. Right. You're structuring your life, your decisions, your relationships in such a way that it's going to honor God. Right. And therefore, everything you do has the capacity to honor God. Everything. You don't need to lessen the priority. And I don't want to be ignorant of the fact that Paul says if you're married, your focus can be distracted, which I can't disagree with the verse in itself, but it's easy to see that in the context he's talking to people who are about to face a very serious bunch of conflicts and events around them where they don't know it, but their whole city's about to be ransacked. There's going to be some extra care that's needed in the situation to tend to your family, because there's going to be actual physical violence around you all the time for a period of time when the Romans sack Jerusalem. But with that said, I still hold to, if you set up your walk as such that you're focusing on God, and then your actions will trickle down from that, and therefore you'll honor your wife. Or we could do a different one. So if you look in Colossians, it talks about, again, first couple chapters, you've got awesome revelation. We've been transferred from the kingdom of darkness to the glorious kingdom of his life and become qualified to be partakers of inheritance with him. We hear about baptism and how we've been raised to life with Christ if we've been baptized and come out of that water. You see all these awesome spiritual things that were done. But then Paul transitions and he says, therefore, fathers, don't embitter your children, or they will become discouraged. So now, just taking all this in, I'm thinking, all right, well, that means when I'm picking up my son, even that, if it's in the right context, if it's coming from the right place, that's just setting up your life according to the walk that you're called to. That's just honoring God in caring for your family, your children. That's just, you could take it, you could use work as an example. He does it in Colossians chapter 3. He says, he's talking to slaves. He says, even if you're enslaved, do everything as unto the Lord. So how much more so us as just regular employees, we can do our jobs unto the Lord and thus honor God in our walk. And it doesn't have to be because we want to advance. It doesn't have to be because we want to make more money. Those things don't have to be the premier focal point when we make that decision. What I'm suggesting is that the decision to do a good job should be birthed out of, we want to walk according to the call we have, which the call that we have is that we're going to do our jobs as unto the Lord, And when we do our jobs as unto the Lord, we'll find advancement. And again, that just echoes back to that seek first the kingdom. Seek first the kingdom, and these things will be given unto you. And I think a lot of times the worldly wisdom, and I can appreciate it so much, of take your job, for instance. I have education. I have a degree. I know where people go to make money. I know, jobs and positions and things that you could pursue and try to connect here or there. And it wouldn't, I'm not saying this arrogantly, but it wouldn't be very difficult in a certain sense to relocate, get a higher paying job, and advance up a career ladder. It really wouldn't be that difficult. And yet, I'm entirely convinced and completely confident that in following after the number one priority, which is God, I'll still be able to advance and gain ground in that area, gain ground financially, gain ground in all those ways. But the main difference is that the worldly path might be relocation, re-emphasize your priorities, or work more hours, or maybe even do something unethical in some situations in order to advance. And what's going to happen at the end of that path, in a lot of cases, and you see it all the time, is that people gain what they set their sight on in, say, their career advancement, but they had to sacrifice dearly in other areas of their life. So maybe their family suffered, or their kids suffered, or their ministry suffered, or they never got into a ministry because it was always, I'll do that someday when I get to this position. And my point is that if you maintain that priority of God is number one, He's made a call, He's invited us to walk in a way worthy of that call, then it's fully within your capacity to achieve all the things and keep it all in order and not have any area of your life ever crumble or fall apart or be disrupted. But the key is going to be keeping that focus and tapping into that unseen reality that God is in the works. And so here's another fun example from the past 2 days. So Tuesday, I'm at work, and I have a voicemail from a person that I spoke to probably about 8 months ago. And at the time that I'd spoken to her, I had helped her with a problem. Essentially, something had been done wrong. I corrected it. I explained everything to her. Everything was fixed. She was very happy. And at that time, she had promised me, she said, I want to write a letter to your supervisor to commend you for a job well done, because you really went out of your way and you got this one right, and you did something that other people failed to do for whatever reason. But to the best of my knowledge, no letter ever came. And I was like, all right, well, whatever. It's no big deal. I was just doing my job anyway. No letter of commendation is necessary. But she calls me up. This is 9 months later. 9 months. I'm the guy who works at Social Security and spoke to her for a half hour 9 months ago. She calls me up, left me a message. I call her back. She says, I just want to let you know that I haven't forgotten about that letter that I said I was going to send out. And I had a lightning strike hit my house, and it messed up some files on my computer. I lost something on I lost my hard drive, essentially. But I want to re-get that information, and I want to write that letter and get it out for you. And it's like, all right, well, if that's not unseen forces working for my advantage, I'm not sure what is. That coupled with the other business transaction, it's like, all right, one was good, but 2 in a row in 2 days, I'm persuaded that unseen realities are at work, or potentially at work, all the time in your life. And it's not meant to be, well, it is meant to be concealed in this regard. It's unseen. So you will not be able to see with your eyes the Father. It's not going to work that way. But if you he's a God he operates by faith. That's how he operates. If he wanted it to be by sight, he would have done everything in the Bible differently. But he's always wanted it to be a faith-based relationship, always. And so therefore it should be no surprise that it still comes down to, am I going to have faith that there's a God who's involved more than what I can just see, but also orchestrating things in unseen ways that potentially will advantage you. And I'm almost hesitant to say anything about the advantage part, because when it starts to become the advantage part and you lose focus and you say, I want to do this because I want more favor, well, then you're losing focus on what the reality is, which is the priority, that God is God and he's a relational being. And nobody wants a relationship like that. You know what I mean? Like where it's, I'm using you to get my means, but I don't have interest in you as the person. I'm interested in what you can do for me. That's not how he operates. So what am I saying here? Am I promising everybody that everything's going to work out all the time? It's probably not going to happen that way. But what I do know is that it's very much available that when problems come up, well, you have unseen realities that are looking to help you out if you're looking to involve them. I haven't seen an angel personally. I haven't. I want to. I talk to God about it sometimes, but I haven't seen one yet. But nevertheless, I can see the evidence of the activity around me. So probably many of you are in a similar boat. I don't know if a lot of us have necessarily would say, I've seen an angel, but a lot of us have seen his hand at work. And what I'm encouraging you to do is that you need to not get distracted by the things that could distract you and start going after the provider of all this awesome stuff and realize how great he is. I don't even know if this clock means anything. Is it just set ahead still? Is it 8:44 or it's 7:44, right? All right, good. Otherwise, things got way out of hand there. Yeah, that past hour was an unseen reality. So yeah, there's a few more things that have been. It's all related, but they've been on my mind the past couple days as well. And it's all ultimately relating back to this. It's all relating back to God in the end. But I'll tell you something about basic. So I mentioned that I got to work early, got there at 7 o'clock, managed to get out first thing as soon as I can, had a few hours before basic started, was able to jump right back in, praying in tongues, right into the right mindset, straight away, it's no problem. And I get to basic, and I can safely say is KJ's back there? Tim and KJ, you're here. Kyle, you're here. Jeanette, you're here. It was, Stacy, you were a turning point, but it was the lowest turnout I've seen in our college ministry since the days of yore. Whatever that means. It's been a long time since we've had this few people there. And there were some circumstances that were involved with that. But in any case, I'm all prayed up and there's like nobody there. And there's a handful of people, but normally, or I shouldn't say normally, because there's a new normal. There's a new normal for me now. But in the past, I'll say, I might have seen that and been very discouraged in the sense of I might have felt like I've been spending all this time doing stuff and trying to prepare, and I can't believe that there's so few people here, and it just would have been a discouraging trail that I might have gone down in my mind. But Monday night was very different. I honestly don't think it would have mattered to me whether there were 8 people or 50 people there. I would have said exactly what I would have said because I know it was from God. And I walked away completely satisfied because another component of this is that, especially if you're involved with ministry, and I know we're the Wednesday night crew, a lot of us are involved with ministry in some form or another. But especially when it involves some kind of presentation, whether it's musical or speaking or whatever, dance or whatever it may be. Oh, Lori's not here. I just had something come to me that would have been funny if she was here. I'll just try anyway. You could tell her about it, Keith. So I was going to say, it's very easy to lose the forest for the trees. And what I mean is that you can get distracted by preparation for whatever it is that you're doing in ministry, and you'll lose sight of the grandeur that is the forest, that is God, because you're focusing on a singular performance. And in the past, I would have probably thought something like, wow, I've been praying in tongues a lot of time to talk to 8 people, including myself. However, that was not my mindset whatsoever. My mindset was, I'm not even doing anything in preparation anymore. I didn't prepare for tonight at all, in the sense of there was no, oh, I better sit down and study something for Wednesday night. It was, oh, my life is living epistleship, and therefore there's going to be something to say Monday, and there will be something to say on Wednesday, and there will be something to say tomorrow as well, assuming I carry on that path. And there's very much something available for all of us to do or participate with or to minister in one form or another, and it's available. We just have to take the step to, in a certain sense, not that preparation is a bad thing. Preparation can be a great thing. But when it becomes about preparation instead of about God, well then, it's like Kubis Jr. said when he was here, you could prepare a sermon with Google. It's completely true. I could look up information and cross-reference things and the whole 9 yards, and this is what's going to be great about it. And somebody may have already done it before, and I could just borrow it and say it. But that's just preparation. That's all that it is. That isn't from God. Not to say that you won't talk about God and say valid things about him, but what I'm after, and not that I've never been after this before, I certainly have, but what I can feel the emphasis on right now is that God is the priority. He is. And if that's where he is, every other area has the capacity to work the way that it's supposed to work and to function the way it's supposed to function. Your marriage, your relationship with your kids, your relationship with your parents, your relationships with the other people in this church, your relationships at your job, everything. It all has the capacity to work out if it follows priority number 1, God. And something else, I don't know if somebody just said a suggestion or not, or if it was a legitimate suggestion. I couldn't exactly hear. But I'm just deciding what's best. All right, so let me briefly say what the opposite of all of this can be. To some extent, I've mentioned it of, all right, you could emphasize preparation over God, or you could emphasize pursuing a career and at the expense of other areas of your life. Here's a scriptural event that happened in Exodus chapter 5. So this is what the devil wants, or what one avenue that he can use to distract from this purpose. He's definitely used it against me before. He's probably used it against many of you. The backdrop, because it's a whole chapter, it's you've got the Israelites. They're enslaved by the Egyptians. They have to do forced labor. The particular task at hand is they're supposed to kiln bricks. And like with a lot of things, there's a quota involved. You have to make a certain amount of bricks every day. This is the job. We've got slave drivers who are going to make it happen. We've got your own people who help oversee your own production. And now Moses comes along, and he starts talking about this. Let's go out into the desert and sacrifice to the Lord for a few days. And he goes to Pharaoh with this suggestion, and Pharaoh's response is not a favorable one for the Israelites. He says, all right, well, here's what we're going to do for that request. Same amount of bricks as you always had to make. However, I'm going to take away some of your supplies, and you're going to have to gather your supplies on your own in order to make the same amount of bricks. So the output or the throughput is still supposed to be the same, but you're going to have to take a lot more time to produce that same thing because now you have to gather these materials. And here's what Pharaoh, that maniacal, Satan-inspired man, his thought process, we're all God's children. But he says in verse 8, they are lazy, that is why they are crying out, let us go sacrifice to our God. Make the work harder for the men so that they keep working and pay no attention to lies. So if you understand certain things about the Old Testament, Pharaoh is the anti-voice to God. He speaks the things that God doesn't like. And that being the case, he's saying, essentially, let's get them so distracted with other tasks and responsibilities that they'll forget all about the idea of sacrificing to God. And like I said, I've experienced it myself. We all have that capacity to slip into that mindset of, I'm just going to do X, Y, and Z things because I have to take care of them, and I'll worry about honoring God later. Let me take care of these responsibilities first, then I'll honor God later. And the tendency is that once you've taken care of that preliminary list of my responsibilities, well, lo and behold, you still didn't go to sacrifice to God because a new list came up that continues to distract you. And it'll just perpetuate itself. You'll just keep doing that, and you'll never break through to what we're actually after, which is let's go out to the desert for a few days and honor God. Right. Let's go out to the desert for a few days and worship God. And in reality, that's what he's looking for. That's what God is looking for. Not that we have to go to the desert per se, but he wants us to be willing to consecrate ourselves from what we do day in and day out and set ourselves apart for his purposes from time to time. And then in the meantime, when you're not actually, physically, like Sunday night I had all that time where that was part of the word he used, was consecrate yourself to me. Maybe we don't always have that amount of time or window to consecrate ourselves to him, but then we're going to go out into the rest of our day and we're going to do all the other things I was just talking about walking worthy according to the call that you're called to. And if you keep those two things going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, because all of it ultimately is honoring God, all of it ultimately is sacrificing to God, all of it ultimately is keeping him at the forefront, there's immense possibilities that come from all of it. And it's coming up on 8. There's, I guess at this point, other things that I'm thinking about, but I don't feel like this is a fine transition point to something else. The something else is really this. A month or so ago, whenever the healing pool, the miracle pool service was, where we went through the water and got prayed for, and various people had healings and different manifestations of God come on them. I know 100% that I was healed of something that night. And it had been an ailment that had been going on for a good 6 months. There were a number of people here who I had even told specifically, I have this problem, hasn't gone away yet, still hoping it will. And it just had kind of gone on for an extended period of time. That night, I know that I got healed. And ever since that night, and ever since I realized that, all I've thought about is the next time I'm involved with ministry at church on a Wednesday, it doesn't matter how I feel, it doesn't matter what I think about it, it does not matter. I am going to make an offer to pray for people who have whatever it may be. And, at this point, it doesn't even have to be a physical healing, but it goes nicely with everything I've said tonight in this regard. I'm talking about unseen realities. I don't even know what's going on right now in the unseen realities. I really don't. But I do know if I could get healed that night, just kind of on a whim, I didn't have much expectation, I really didn't, but I had enough expectation to go through the pool. If there's something wrong, or there's something you want prayer for or agreement for, I just want to invite unseen realities to affect the situation so that there's manifestation. And I feel like I'll use this passage of Scripture just to explain it. In Mark, it talks about a difficult to pronounce ethnicity called, Syrophoenician, the Syrophoenician woman. And she's got a daughter. Now, Jesus came to her hometown, which is obviously not in Israel. It's not a part of his ministry plan. And it says that when he got there, he kept himself hidden in the house that he arrived at. And it doesn't say this explicitly, but if you're reading between the lines and you see, okay, he's not in Israel, and he's keeping himself hidden, that's basically telling you that Jesus is not really looking to do ministry where he is right now at this time. He's not looking to do it. It's not part of his game plan. However, it says that this woman, the Syrophoenician woman, she finds him somehow, gets to his doorstep, throws herself at his feet, and says, my daughter's got this problem. I think she had a demon that was oppressing her. Can you help me? And it's the famous, he says, no, I'm not going to do it. Or what is it exactly? Yeah, exactly. I'm not going to give the children's bread. And she responds that, but even the dogs eat the crumbs from the table. And he says, for an answer such as this, you've been granted what you've requested. And she got the report that her daughter was healed at that moment. And the point is that the timing for you may feel unexpected, but in reality, in the unseen reality, Jesus is just available, hanging out at some house and ready to go. And he's pretty much just waiting for somebody to throw themselves at his feet so that he'll do a work. And my point is that whether it's healing or something else, when you bring your problem face to face with Christ, solutions tend to come. And in this case, it's just going to be a matter of coming up and I'll pray for you. So I don't know if we can get an instrumentalist just to play while we do this, but Gary's offered vocals, but I'm really looking for somebody to play an instrument at this time. But yeah, while Brad gets up, I just want to pray. Father, I thank you for your unseen realities, God. I thank you that there are many more for us than are against us. And God, I thank you that though there may be problems to the left or to the right, with you as our shield, we will not fall. God, I thank you for your strength. I thank you for everything your Spirit has empowered us to do. I thank you that the union between your Spirit and man produces something. And Father, I thank you for the capacity that we have to meet solutions tonight.